A jury in Kenosha, Wisconsin returned a not guilty verdict on all charges in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. The teen faced life in prison if convicted of the most serious charges, shooting and killing 2 men and wounding a third during violent Black Lives Matter protests last year. Rittenhouse broke down in tears as the verdict was read and at one point seemed unable to stand. His case garnered national attention as prosecutors tried to prove that he was the aggressor. Rittenhouse claimed self-defense. Nancy Chen covered the entire trial and has more from the courthouse.
500 National Guard troops remain on standby tonight outside the city of Kenosha. But so far, while there have been demonstrations, there's been no signs of unrest.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty.
Kyle Rittenhouse cried, collapsing onto the table after jurors found the 18-year-old not guilty on all charges.
Not guilty.
Overcome with emotion, Rittenhouse needed help getting back to his chair.
Charges against the defendant on all counts are dismissed with prejudice.
The teen was facing 5 felony counts, including first-degree intentional homicide, which carried a life sentence. Rittenhouse's attorney, Mark Richards, was asked how Rittenhouse felt leaving the courthouse a free man.
A huge sense of relief for what the jury did to him today. He wishes none of this would have ever happened.
A pivotal point in the trial was the day Rittenhouse took the stand and broke down during questioning.
Take a deep breath, Kyle. When we prepared Kyle and we worked on his testimony, there were things we couldn't talk about in my office because it got too emotional and he couldn't handle it. He's in, counseling for PTSD.
The trial garnered attention nationwide. President Biden said he understood the verdict would leave many Americans feeling angry and concerned, including himself.
Well, look, I stand by what the jury has concluded. The jury system works and we have to abide by it.
The jury of 7 women and 5 men deliberated for about 26 hours. They believed Rittenhouse's claims that he acted in self-defense when he killed 2 men and wounded a third during unrest in Kenosha last year.
So I didn't do anything wrong. I defended myself.
During 8 days of testimony, prosecutors tried to portray Rittenhouse as an instigator, armed with an AR-15 style weapon who provoked the shootings.
No justice, no peace.
Outside the courthouse, friends and family members of the victims called the verdict unjust.
I am heartbroken.
Susan Hughes is the great aunt of Anthony Huber, the second man killed by Rittenhouse.
Do you think this was a fair verdict?
I think they tried. I like the fact that there must have been someone fighting for us, because it wouldn't have taken them that long.
As for what's next, Rittenhouse's attorney says that he will move out of this area over safety concerns and that he wants to become a nurse. Lana?
Nancy, thank you. For more, let's bring in Alex Little. He's a criminal defense and litigation attorney and a former federal prosecutor. Alex, what's your take on the verdict?
Good evening. I think for folks who watched the trial, it's not too surprising. The state's case was going to be difficult given the videos and the interaction that led up to the shootings. They really tried to rely on this idea of provocation, and the law, particularly in these circumstances, that was going to be hard to do. Self-defense cases are always the most difficult cases for the prosecution, especially when there's circumstances like this. So it's not a surprise. I think it's disappointing for lots of reasons, I think, for the public and for what the circumstances around what happened, and maybe not specifically what happened that day.
Well, the jurors, we know, asked a number of questions during deliberation, most of which had to do with that drone video of the shooting. Talk to us about the significance of that evidence.
I think the drone video for the prosecution was their attempt, their hope to show that Kyle Rittenhouse was pointing that gun prior to the shootings and was provoking the violent acts that then sort of later happened to him. That was the crux of their theory. It wasn't a great video, but certainly it was the best they had.
Wisconsin law also gave these jurors the option to consider lesser charges after acquitting Rittenhouse of the original charges brought forth by the prosecution. What do you believe is the reason that they did not exercise that option?
Well, they had a number of lesser included charges there, but self-defense was a complete defense to all of them. And included in the jury instructions was a statement to the jury that if you don't believe beyond a reasonable doubt that the prosecution has proved that he did not act in self-defense, you don't need to continue on to consider those factors. So self-defense was as much a defense to the first-degree or most serious murder charges as it was just the reckless endangerment charges.
So let's talk a little bit more about that self-defense claim. Now that the verdict is back, what precedent might this send for other cases? What implications might this have largely in the legal system?
Well, I think there's two different ways to look at this case. One is in the legal system, that sort of discrete, the evidence that was heard, how that affects the legal process in Wisconsin or in that county. The second issue is how it affects the country more broadly, and I think that's the more problematic issue. You know, the law in Wisconsin doesn't deal with the fact that a 17-year-old got a gun, went to this location in a way that I think most people would believe is morally culpable. He wasn't a hero for doing that. The legal question, though, of whether he was acting in self-defense in the discrete moments when he fired is much more narrow, and I don't think it's going to change much of anything. That's a verdict which is consistent with similar cases elsewhere. So you really have the sort of small, narrow legal questions which led to his acquittal and the broader societal and policy questions which led to him being there in the first place.
All right. Alex Little, thank you.